Hey guys, so as I'm sitting here editing this video, I am noticing that some of my footage is a little bit out of focus. And so I realized that yesterday when I was filming this video that on my main camera, I forgot to hit the autofocus. And so there are some portions of this video that are a little bit out of focus. And then there's one section of the video that is quite a bit out of focus. I apologize for this. I swear that it will not happen again. And that you'll get nice quality videos from me in the future. I hope that you'll still watch and still enjoy because this video has particular importance to me. So without further ado, enjoy the show.
Oh, hello, and welcome to another episode of The Blue Wizard Bakes. I'm Joseph, the Blue Wizard. All right, in all seriousness, my apologies to the people of England. Shut up. Once again, my apologies. But can you blame me? British culture has often been associated, at least here in America, with one of the very heights of sophistication. And with the popularity of shows like Downton Abbey or The Crown or Belgravia, you know, it's hard not to be impressed and slightly obsessed with the British elite. One of the things that obviously always impressed me is, what is it that they eat? I've always been so impressed by all the little, finger foods and awesome, sumptuous feasts that they were having. And the thing that impressed me the most, of course, is the tradition of the British tea time. Tea happens to be one of my favorite drinks, but with the tea is always served some of these little snacks, little pastries or little finger sandwiches or things like that, which are kind of fun to look at and interesting to eat. As I was doing research into a lot of these little finger foods and pastries and things, I noticed that even though they look very impressive, most of them are actually relatively easy to make, and none are truly easier than what we are making today for our recipe. We are going to be making meringues. Meringues are a delicious sweet treat that are often crispy on the outside and nice and marshmallowy on the inside. And they make up the basis of a lot of fancy schmancy desserts, but they're really easy to make. The only thing that is difficult about them is the fact that they take a certain quality that I may not necessarily have in abundance. Patience. Yes, these meringues do take a little bit of time in order to put together, but trust me, they will be worth it. So what are we doing sitting around here? To the kitchen! So now that we're here, we need to do two things before we can get started. The first thing that we have to do is to make sure to preheat our oven to 225 degrees. As you'll see, we have a very low temperature on our oven this time. All right, as I mentioned before, these are going to take a little bit of patience, a little bit of time. So we use a low temperature to make sure we get that perfect texture in our meringues. The second thing that we need to do is to, of course, get all of our ingredients and equipment into one place so that we have everything we need, where we need it, when we need it. So let's make some magic. And there we go. Everything that we need, exactly where we need it, exactly when we need it. So the first thing that we need to do for making our meringues is we need to make our sugar mixture. Now, traditional meringues, way back when they were made forever and a day ago, they would just make them using sugar, but we're actually going to add something else to our meringues as one of those little tricks that I learned while I was developing this recipe. Is that we're actually going to add a little bit of cornstarch, 2 teaspoons of cornstarch to 3/4 cup of regular sugar. And what that cornstarch is going to do is to give us a nice consistency to our meringues and make sure that they have a nice light texture. And if we make a thicker meringue, it'll make sure that the inside is going to be nice and marshmallowy rather than turning to any kind of like hard crackly caramel. Now the next thing that we need to add to our meringue mixture is the star of the show, the thing that makes meringues meringues, and that is going to be our egg whites. So I have 4 eggs that I'm just going to separate the whites out. And the way that I like to do this is I take and crack my eggs, and I know that some people say you don't crack them on the side of the bowl, but to me that's the easiest. And I just take and bounce the shells back and forth in my hands as I let the egg white drip down into the bowl and just keep the yolk inside of the shell. It works for me every time. The big thing that you want to do is make sure that you don't crack the egg yolk, because if you get any amount of egg yolk into this bowl, then the egg whites will not whip up. So you want to make sure you don't get any egg yolk. All right, so I just got back from washing my hands because I did handle raw egg with my hands. So you should always make sure if you're handling raw eggs that you should wash your hands right after you do that, so you don't get any germs or anything like that from the raw egg over anything else that you're using. So I just got back from doing that. And another thing I wanted to point out about these eggs, which is super important to making the perfect meringue, is to make sure that you are using room temperature eggs for this. Now, I know that a lot of bakers say that you should use room temperature eggs for all of baking, and I have to say I mostly ignore that rule. But for this recipe, I want to make sure to do it, because the best way to get the fastest whip on your eggs, because this recipe already takes long enough, you want to make sure that you're using room temperature eggs instead of eggs that are cold from the fridge. Eggs that are cold from the fridge will work, but you're going to be standing and whipping a lot longer than you might be if you were to use the room temperature eggs. Okay, so anyway, the next thing that we need to add into our eggs is we're just going to add a little pinch of salt, because as we know, even baked goods should get salt, so that's just a pinch of kosher salt that I added. And then I'm also going to add anywhere from 1/2 to 3/4 of a teaspoon of vanilla to our mixture. You can use anywhere in that amount depending on how strongly you want your meringues to be flavored. And I'm actually adding here an imitation vanilla. A lot of chefs, of course, recommend that you use not imitation, but that you use the real deal. But I like this stuff because it's actually imitation clear vanilla. And since I want my meringues to be white in color rather than to have sort of like a tannish color that they can get, I want to make sure that I'm using a clear vanilla, because they're not going to discolor my meringues like you would see otherwise. You can also add tons of other different kinds of flavors to this. You can add almond extract, you can add mint extract, peppermint extract, which would be good around the holidays. You can make these any flavor that you want to. I'm doing vanilla because it's sort of like the basics, right? Now for the fun part. The whipping, okay? So we're gonna whip together these egg whites with our salt and with our vanilla just to get them started before we start adding in any sugar. One thing I wanna do is I wanna make sure that I never put my beater to over a medium-high speed. You don't wanna go all the way to high, okay? And I'll explain why in a second. All right, so I just whipped these egg whites just enough in order to get them to be a little bit frothy. As you can see, they've built up a nice little bit of foam on the top. I don't want to take them too far because I want to start adding my sugar and cornstarch to this really early in the process. Believe me, if you start adding the cornstarch and sugar a little bit later in the process, you don't get as good of a product. You want to start adding them at this point, once the egg whites have gotten that nice little bit of foam on the surface. As I mentioned, as we're going to be whipping, I don't ever take my mixer to over a medium to medium high speed. I don't want to go to the full speed. I have done this before where I've gone full speed because I wanted to go fast, fast, fast. As I said, I am a super impatient person. If you go to that high speed, you're gonna end up with a lot of like large air bubbles inside of your meringues, which isn't gonna give a good texture and consistency to your meringues. You wanna have nice, uniform, tiny air bubbles throughout your meringue. All right, so now it's the time that I'm gonna start adding in my sugar. So I'm gonna take and just add a little bit at a time, just sprinkle a little bit in, and then mix it up. And then after that's completely dissolved, I'm gonna add a little bit more. And then, and finally, I'm just gonna add the rest of it. Each time I add the next addition, as soon as I see that the previous addition has been completely dissolved into the egg whites, and then I mix it up again. All right, now that my sugar and cornstarch has been completely dissolved into my egg whites, now comes the part of the process that's going to require a lot of patience. I'm going to have to sit and whip up these egg whites until they form a stiff peak, which is going to take a long time, even with a mixer. All right, so I'm using a hand mixer here because I want to make sure that you guys can see everything that I'm doing. Normally, I would actually do this in a stand mixer instead, because this way I could walk away from it and just let the stand mixer do the work for me, okay? Because it does take at least 10 minutes of constant whipping in order to get to that consistency, and maybe even a little bit longer, all right? So you wanna make sure that you guys are going for the full time. Trust me, it's gonna be worth it in the end. So here we go, let's get mixing. I'll see you again in 10 minutes. It hasn't been 10 minutes. I wasn't kidding. All right, so it's been actually about 12 minutes at this point, and I think I finally gotten to the stage that we call stiff peaks. Now, the way that you can tell that you have a stiff peak is you dip your mixer in and you pull it out and you see, are the peaks that are making on the little beaters, all right, are they actually sticking out? Are they staying stiff? Okay, are they drooping over, or are they staying the way that they are? And that's what you're looking for. Now, even though I've gotten us to the stage of stiff peaks over here, I wanna make sure that my entire mixture is that way. So I'm actually gonna take and scrape down the sides of my bowl, all right, with my spatula, and then whip it up just for like another minute again. Does anybody else do like I do? I have a bunch of different colors of spatulas, and I actually try to coordinate the color of my spatula with the thing that I'm making. Does everybody do stuff like that, or is it just me? Well, I guess it's probably just me. Well, anyway, if you have any weird kitchen habits, let me know down in the comments below. Make me feel a little better that I'm not the only one who does strange things. All right, so now that we have that all in the center of the bowl, I'm just gonna take and give it another whip. All right, so I'd say that's enough. I went for about another minute in there, and all I have to say is God bless whoever came up with the electric mixer, because can you imagine if you had to do that by hand with like just a whisk? I can't even, you know what? I have actually a new branding idea coming to mind right now. Workouts with the Blue Wizard. Get forearms of steel with just a whisk and some egg whites. Anybody? No? Kind of not in my wheelhouse, is it? Well, anyway, let's move on. All right, so our meringue mixture is finally done. It's finally whipped together. And the next thing that we have to do is actually pipe out our little meringues, okay? They're gonna be sort of like cookie shaped in size. The way that I'm gonna do this is with a piping bag. Now, I'm using a piping bag here with a star-shaped tip. All right, this is a tip from Wilton. It's a 1M tip, all right, which is the large star-shaped tip. You don't have to use this if you don't have it. Don't look for special equipment if you don't want it. You can actually put your stuff, your mixture, into a Ziploc bag, a large gallon size Ziploc bag that you've snipped the end off of, and you can make just little dollops with this mixture instead, okay? Instead of doing piping. I'm like doing the piping because I've got it, so if you got it, why not use it? Now, the way that I fill a piping bag is I always take and fold over, okay, the top half of the piping bag, and I make like a little C shape with my hands and sort of cup the piping bag around my hands, okay? And then I can take my spatula, my little rubber scraper, and then start filling my piping bag. All right, so the next thing, I pull the top of the bag up, and I'll use the rest of this mixture. Don't worry, it won't go to waste. And then I sort of just twist the top of it, okay? You wanna twist the top of the bag to hold all the mixture in, and then I start squeezing into the end of the tube, okay? You can use the same technique with any sort of frosting or anything like that, and I'll show you some of the ways that I'm going to pipe our mixture right now. These are just two regular sheet pans that I have lined with some regular parchment paper. You don't want to use a silicone baking mat for this, even though the meringues won't stick to it. I found that they won't cook the bottom of the meringues properly if you use something as thick as a silicone mat. You definitely want to use parchment paper for this. So with our piping bag, I'm actually going to show you how to make two different shapes of meringue cookies here. I'm going to show you one shape. The first one is going to be what is called a rosette. And this type of meringue shape is going to give you a nice crispy meringue that's crispy all the way through. All right, and it's going to be sort of like the texture and consistency of what you would normally get in like a cookie. Okay, so let's start with that. One of the things that you might want to do to make sure your parchment doesn't move around is I take and put a little dollop of meringue on the bottom of my parchment paper so that it doesn't shift around while I'm working. I am holding my piping bag with one arm to control, or one hand to control and the other hand to squeeze, okay? And what I'm gonna do is sort of center it where I want it. I'm gonna take and start putting even pressure and just start moving in a circle all the way around. And you end up with this nice little rosette shape, all right, is what you see over here, all right? So you're just gonna keep doing that. And again, you wanna keep even pressure, and you can make them as big or as small as you want. You can make them, I guess, as the better statement would be, as wide or as thin as you want, okay? And you just keep going around like that. All right, so I'm gonna show you another shape as well. This shape is going to give you more of a crispy on the outside, chewy on the inside type of shape, because we're gonna make them thicker, okay? So instead of the nice flat rosette like what we made before, I'm gonna show you a thicker design. All right, and this is what I like to call the Cupcake Topper, because it's sort of like what you would traditionally see on the top of a cupcake. All right, so you're gonna start off with one central dollop, okay, which again, this is the same way that you would do if you were doing the top of a cupcake. And then you're gonna start moving around that dollop in a circle until you make a nice spiral, all right, with the tip at the top, okay? And I'm gonna make several of those. And again, this is going to make a thicker meringue, and so it'll be crispy on the outside, but it'll still have a little marshmallowy chew on the inside. I'm actually also going to show you a little bonus shape, and this is sort of more like what you would do if you weren't using a piping bag like this. If you were wanting to use a regular like Ziploc bag, you could do this type of shape. I'm just going to take and hold my piping bag up and down and make a little dollop in place. And again, you could do this easily if you were just using a Ziploc bag and no tip at all. It would just end up that your dollop would be sort of like round in shape rather than having like that star shape to it. And these make a nice little thinner meringue, so it's more crispy, but they're nice little like one bites instead of like an entire cookie. All right, so now that our meringues have been piped out, it's time that we get them into the oven. Let's go. We will be taking these and placing them into the oven, again at 225 degrees. I'm placing the pans on the upper and lower middle shelves of the oven. We are going to let them sit in this 225 degree oven for an entire hour. Yes, kids, I told you it takes patience. While those meringues are baking, I just wanted to take this time to remind you guys that if you like this recipe and you want to try it out, that I always put the ingredients and the directions in the description box below the video. Also, if you like this video and you want to see more like it, please make sure to hit that like button down below. It really helps me out when you guys hit the like button, and it helps more people to find the video. Another thing that's a super big help to me is if you guys will hit the subscribe button down below and click the little bell for notifications. The more subscribers I have, the more my channel grows, and the more that YouTube will promote my videos, and the more people that I can teach how to do all these fantastic bakes and of course cooks that I do on my channel. If you do end up making this recipe, I would love to hear about it and see it. Please follow me on any one of my social medias. I'm on both Instagram and Twitter at the handle @JoeTheBlueWhiz. All right, so it's been an hour, and I know that you guys are thinking, oh hey, yay, it's time for meringues. You're wrong. Again, this recipe takes patience, but again, it is going to be so worth it. So instead of taking the meringues out of the oven at this point, we're actually just gonna turn the oven off, and we are just going to let them cool in the oven for about an hour. Now, if you really want to do things the 100% correct way, you'll let them cool completely in the oven. But I only let them cool for an hour, and then I take them out and let them cool at room temperature for the rest of the way. And then we'll be ready to enjoy. Ah, what better way to enjoy the afternoon than with a nice cup of tea? And what better thing to have with that tea than our patiently awaited for meringues? There we go. Incidentally, the meringues are not just good to be served with tea, they're also fantastic. One of my favorite things to do is to take the thin meringues, the crispy ones, and crumple them up on top of ice cream. They make a fantastic ice cream topping. Not to mention that, like I said before, there's a ton of great desserts that will use meringues as a base. So if you know how to do this, you're going to be able to do a lot of other fancy things too in the kitchen. So let's try it out. Delicious. Crispy, crunchy, even texture. Fantastic thing to sop up some of that delicious tea. Wonderful. So, pour yourself a nice hot cup of tea and grab yourself a meringue because you've earned it. And remember, kids, you don't have to be a professional chef or even a wizard in order to make magic in the kitchen.